London, 1889. The courtroom of the Old Bailey fell into a deathly silence. Benedict Cavendish, the proud Duke of Wycliffe, stood humiliated, stripped of his dignity, and facing life imprisonment for a treason he did not commit. He looked to the gallery, expecting to see his wife Elaine cowering in fear, the woman he had called weak, the woman he had ignored for 3 years. Instead, the heavy oak doors swung open. Elaine did not cower. She walked in, carrying a briefcase that contained secrets the crown itself had tried to bury. In that moment, Benedict realized the terrified mouse he thought he married was actually the lioness who would bring the empire to its knees. This is the story of how the Duke learned the hardest lesson of his life. The rain battered the high windows of Wycliffe Manor, a relentless grey rhythm that matched the mood inside the sprawling estate. Benedict Cavendish, the 9th Duke of Wycliffe, sat at the head of a mahogany dining table long enough to seat 30, though tonight only 2 places were set. At the far end, separated by an expanse of polished wood and cold silence, sat his wife Elaine. Benedict barely glanced at her as he cut into his venison. To him, Elaine Moore was a necessity of lineage, a quiet, plain woman from a respectable but financially declining family in Somerset. He had married her 3 years ago to secure a land border dispute and satisfy his mother's dying wish for him to settle down. He expected a partner who could host grand balls and charm foreign dignitaries. Instead, he got Elaine a woman who stuttered when addressed by the servants, and whose face turned a violent shade of crimson whenever he looked at her for more than 3 seconds. "The season begins in a fortnight," Benedict said, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. He did not look up from his plate. Yes, Your Grace," Elaine replied, her voice barely a whisper. Benedict suppressed a sigh of irritation. "Must you call me that?" "We have been married 3 years. Benedict would suffice, or even husband." Elaine's fork clattered slightly against her china. I did not wish to presume, Benedict." He looked at her then. She was wearing a pale blue dress that washed out her complexion, her brown hair pulled back in a severe, unflattering bun. She looked like a governess, not a duchess. She had no fire, no wit, no spine. In the cutthroat world of London politics, where Benedict operated, weakness was a death sentence. He needed a wolf by his side, and he had been saddled with a lamb. "I will be spending the next month in the city," Benedict announced, signaling the footman to pour more wine. "The railway expansion bill is reaching a critical vote. Tensions are high with the investors from the north. I cannot be distracted by domestic trivialities." It was a dismissal, and they both knew it. He was leaving her behind again. "Of course," Elaine said, her eyes fixed on her water glass. Will Sir Reginald be assisting you?" Benedict paused. It was an odd question. Sir Reginald Archibald was his oldest friend, the man who managed the Wycliffe legal affairs. "Reginald is my right hand. Why do you ask?" Elaine hesitated, her fingers twisting the napkin in her lap. "I only thought. Perhaps you should check the ledgers yourself this time. The expenditures for the northern tracks, they seem high." Benedict laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "And since when does the Duchess of Wycliffe understand the complexities of railway infrastructure? Have you been reading my discarded newspapers again, Elaine?" "I just glanced," she whispered, shrinking back into her chair. "Leave the finances to the men, Elaine," Benedict said, wiping his mouth and standing up. "Stick to your embroidery. Try not to let the estate crumble while I am gone." He strode out of the dining room without a backward glance. He did not see the way Elaine's posture shifted the moment the door clicked shut. He did not see the weak woman lift her head, her eyes sharp and clear, devoid of the stuttering fear she displayed only moments before. He did not see her pull a small leather-bound notebook from the pocket of her dress, jotting down a single entry: Reginald Archibald. November 14th. Discrepancy confirmed. Benedict thought she was a ghost in his house. He had no idea she was the only one truly watching. London was a beast of smoke and ambition. Benedict thrived in it. His townhouse in Mayfair was a hub of activity filled with politicians, bankers and lords, all clamoring for a piece of the new railway line that would connect the coal mines of the north to the shipping ports of the south. It was a project that would double the Wycliffe fortune and cement Benedict's legacy. 3 weeks into his stay, the celebratory mood shattered. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Benedict was in his study, nursing a brandy despite the early hour when the heavy doors burst open. It wasn't his butler, but a squad of uniformed officers from Scotland Yard, led by Inspector Graham, a man known for his dislike of the aristocracy. "What is the meaning of this?" Benedict demanded, rising to his full height. "You cannot barge into the home of a peer of the realm." "I have a warrant, Your Grace," Inspector Graham said, his face grim, "for the arrest of Benedict Cavendish for high treason and embezzlement of crown funds." Benedict froze. "Treason? That is absurd." "Is it?" Graham stepped aside, revealing a man standing behind him. It was Sir Reginald Archibald. But Reginald wasn't in cuffs. He was standing with the officers, looking sorrowful. "I'm sorry, Benedict," Reginald said, shaking his head. "I tried to hide it as long as I could. But when they found the forged bonds in your private safe, I couldn't protect you anymore." "My safe?" Benedict's mind raced. "Only you and I have the combination, Reginald. I haven't opened that safe in months." "Exactly," Reginald said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Which is why it was the perfect place to hide the evidence of your dealings with the French anarchists." "French anarchists?" Benedict roared, lunging forward, but 2 officers restrained him. "I am a patriot. I have served the Queen." "The documents say otherwise," Inspector Graham said, holding up a sheaf of papers. "Signatures that match yours perfectly. Transfers of funds from the railway project directly into accounts linked to known enemies of the state. It looks like you were building a war chest, Your Grace." Benedict stared at Reginald. The betrayal was so absolute, so cold, it took his breath away. Reginald had been skimming money for years, likely rigging the railway project to fail, and now he was pinning the entire collapse on Benedict to save his own skin. And he had done it beautifully. "You snake," Benedict hissed. "You won't get away with this." Reginald stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Benedict could hear. "I already have. You're arrogant, Benedict. You never look at the details. You think you're above it all. That's why you'll hang, and I'll be the new administrator of the Wycliffe estate." Benedict was dragged from his home, in chains paraded through the streets of London, where the press was already waiting. The headlines were already printed, "The Traitor Duke." He was thrown into a damp cell in Newgate Prison, the luxury of his life stripped away in an instant. For 3 days he sat in darkness. His lawyers abandoned him. His political allies distanced themselves. The evidence Reginald had planted was overwhelming. On the 4th day, a guard banged on the cell door. "Visitor." Benedict looked up, expecting his solicitor. Instead, a small, cloaked figure stepped into the stench of the cell. The figure pulled back the hood. It was Elaine. She looked out of place against the grime of the prison walls, her pale skin glowing in the dim light. She wore the same drab grey dress she always wore. Benedict let out a bitter laugh. Come to see the ruin you married. Go home, Elaine. Go back to Somerset. The crown will seize the estates. You'll be destitute. Elaine didn't move. She stood by the heavy iron door, her hands clasped before her. I brought you clean linen, she said softly. I don't need linen. Benedict snapped, his temper fraying. I need a miracle. I need a lawyer who isn't afraid of the crown. I need to prove that Reginald is a liar. I know Reginald is a liar, Elaine said. Her voice didn't stutter. It was calm, flat matter-of-fact. Benedict blinked, rubbing his temples. You don't understand. He has forged documents. He has witnesses. He has the bank ledgers. He has the secondary ledgers, Elaine corrected. Benedict stopped. What? The secondary ledgers, Elaine repeated, stepping closer. The smell of lavender and old paper clung to her, masking the prison stench. Reginald keeps 2 sets, one for the tax collectors which he doctored to frame you, and one for himself to track what he actually stole. He keeps the real ones in a safe deposit box at the Bank of England under the name Mr. Silas Vane. Benedict stared at her. How could you possibly know that? Elaine adjusted her gloves. Because I have been tracking Reginald's embezzlement for 2 years. I tried to tell you at dinner before you left. You told me to stick to embroidery. Benedict felt a flush of shame, hot and sharp. You knew. I suspected, Elaine said. I confirmed it when I cross-referenced the household accounts with the public railway filings. It was sloppy arithmetic, really. Reginald is greedy, and greedy men make mistakes. If you have this proof, Benedict said, standing up and grabbing the bars of his cell. Give it to my solicitor. Get me out of here. Elaine looked at him, and for the first time Benedict saw a flash of steel in her grey eyes. Your solicitor is on Reginald's payroll, Benedict. If I give him the proof, it will disappear, and you will hang. Then what do we do? Benedict asked, desperation creeping into his voice. He realized with a jolt of horror that his life was entirely in the hands of the woman he had dismissed as a fool. We do nothing, Elaine said. Nothing. We wait for the trial, she said. Reginald needs to believe he has won. He needs to feel safe enough to testify against you in open court. If we strike now, he runs. If we wait, we catch him. You want me to stay in here? Benedict asked, incredulous. To rot in this cell until the trial. You are strong, Benedict, Elaine said, her voice softening slightly, though her expression remained unreadable. You can survive a few weeks of discomfort, but you must trust me. Trust you, Benedict scoffed. You faint at the sight of a spider, Elaine. You can't face the High Court. You can't face Reginald. Elaine turned to the door, signaling the guard to let her out. She paused with her hand on the iron latch. She didn't look back at him. You thought I was weak because I was silent, she said, her voice echoing in the stone chamber. But you never asked what I was listening to. The door slammed shut, leaving Benedict alone in the dark, wondering if he had just been saved, or if his wife was simply enjoying watching him suffer. The trial of the Duke of Wycliffe was the sensation of the decade. The Old Bailey was packed to the rafters. Ladies of high society used fans to hide their whispers, while reporters from every gazette in London scribbled furiously. Benedict sat in the defendant's dock, looking gaunt. The weeks in prison had hollowed his cheeks, but his eyes were burning with a mixture of rage and fear. He scanned the room. Reginald sat in the front row, looking impeccably mournful, playing the part of the betrayed friend to perfection. The prosecutor, a bulldog of a man named Sir Thomas, began his opening statement. He painted Benedict as a monster, a greedy aristocrat who sold his country's secrets to line his pockets. He produced the forged letters. He produced the bank transfers. The jury, composed of 12 stern-faced men, looked at Benedict with undisguised disgust. Benedict's defense was non-existent. His new court-appointed lawyer, a nervous young man named Mr. Pumble, stammered through objections that were quickly overruled. "I call Sir Reginald Archibald to the stand," Sir Thomas bellowed. Reginald took the stand. He wiped a fake tear from his eye. "It breaks my heart," Reginald told the court. "I loved Benedict like a brother. But when I found the letters from the French contacts, I knew I had to do my duty." "And did the Duke ever speak of his dissatisfaction with the crown?" Sir Thomas asked. "Often." Reginald lied smoothly. "He called the Queen a tyrant. He said the railway was just a means to funnel gold out of the country." A gasp went through the gallery. Benedict gripped the railing of the dock, his knuckles white. "Liar!" He wanted to scream. "You filthy liar!" "The crown rests," Sir Thomas announced, looking smug. The judge, a severe man named Lord Justice Halloway, looked over his spectacles. "Does the defense wish to call any witnesses?" Mr. Pumble stood up, shaking. No. My lord. The defense calls the Duchess of Wycliffe." The voice rang out from the back of the courtroom, clear and commanding. Benedict's head snapped up. Elaine stood at the double doors. She was not wearing the grey, shapeless dress she usually wore. She was dressed in deep midnight blue velvet, tailored to perfection. She wore a hat with a black veil that she swept back with a single, elegant motion. She didn't look like a mouse. She looked like a queen in mourning for her enemies. The courtroom murmured. "My lord," Elaine said, walking down the center aisle. Her stride was long and confident. The sound of her heels on the wooden floor was the only sound in the room. "I am Elaine Cavendish, and I am representing my husband." "You," Judge Halloway scoffed. "A woman cannot serve as legal counsel in the Old Bailey, Duchess. This is highly irregular." "I am not serving as counsel, my lord," Elaine said, reaching the front of the court. She placed a heavy leather briefcase on the table. "I am serving as a witness to the true ownership of the evidence presented." Reginald shifted in his seat. He looked at Elaine, his eyes narrowing. He expected her to be crying. He expected her to beg for mercy. He did not expect the icy calm radiating from her. "Very well," the judge grunted. "Take the stand." Elaine ascended the witness stand. She swore on the Bible. She sat down and looked directly at Reginald. For the first time, Reginald looked away. "Duchess," Mr. Pumble squeaked. What do you have to say?" "I have to say that Sir Reginald is a compelling storyteller," Elaine said, her voice projecting to the furthest corners of the gallery. "But he is a very poor mathematician." "Objection," Sir Thomas shouted. "Relevance." "The relevance," Elaine said, cutting him off, "is that the documents used to convict my husband rely on a transfer of funds dated October the 3rd, 1888. Is that correct?" "It is," Sir Thomas sneered. "The date the treasonous payment was made." "On October the 3rd, 1888, Elaine said, opening her briefcase and pulling out a single yellowed piece of paper. The Bank of England's telegraph lines to the continent were down due to a storm in the Channel. No wire transfers were possible for 48 hours. The courtroom went silent. "Here is the official log from the telegraph office," Elaine said, handing the paper to the bailiff. "If my husband transferred money to France on that day, he must have used carrier pigeons because he certainly didn't use the bank." Reginald's face went pale. "Furthermore," Elaine continued, her pace quickening. "The signature on the treasonous letter. Observe the loop on the B in Benedict. My husband is left-handed. When he writes a B, the ink pools on the left side of the loop. On this document, the ink pools on the right." She pulled out a magnifying glass from her bag and held it up. This signature was written by a right-handed man, trying to mimic a left-handed man. A right-handed man, like Sir Reginald. "This is preposterous," Reginald shouted, standing up. "She is speculating. She is a housewife." Elaine turned her head slowly to look at him. "I am a housewife who manages the accounts of an estate that feeds 300 families, Sir Reginald. I notice when a penny is missing. You stole 3 million. "Prove it," Reginald screamed, losing his composure. "I intend to," Elaine said. She reached into her briefcase again. "I mentioned a safe deposit box earlier to my husband, the one under the name Silas Vane." Reginald froze. He looked like a deer staring down a rifle barrel. "I took the liberty of visiting the bank this morning with a court order I obtained from a sympathetic friend in the Home Office," Elaine said. She pulled out a black ledger. "This is your real ledger, Reginald. It details every bribe, every forgery, and every stolen pound." She slammed the book onto the ledge of the witness stand. The sound cracked like a gunshot. "Benedict Cavendish is a fool for trusting you," Elaine said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "But he is not a traitor. You are." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, but the noise was deafening. Benedict sat in the dock, his mouth slightly open, staring at his wife. He felt as if he were seeing her for the first time. The weak, stuttering girl was gone. In her place was a force of nature. And she wasn't done yet. The chaos following the verdict was unlike anything London had seen since the Queen's Jubilee. Reginald Archibald was dragged screaming from the courtroom, his polished veneer cracking to reveal the desperate, cornered rat he truly was. The officers of Scotland Yard, the very men who had arrested Benedict weeks prior, now clamped the irons onto Reginald's wrists with grim satisfaction. Benedict stood in the center of the madness, a free man, yet he felt entirely unmoored. The jubilant cries of his supporters, fair-weather friends who had scorned him only an hour ago, sounded tinny and hollow. He looked around for the architect of his salvation. Elaine was gathering her papers. She snapped the brass clasps of her briefcase shut with a decisive click, adjusted her veil, and turned to leave. She did not look at him. She did not wait for his gratitude. She simply walked toward the exit, the sea of reporters parting for her, as if she were royalty. "Elaine!" Benedict called out, his voice hoarse from disuse. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the hands patting his back and the shouts of "Justice for the Duke!" He stumbled out into the cool, damp air of the London street, just in time to see her ascending the steps of their carriage. He scrambled in after her, breathless. The door slammed shut, sealing them in the plush, velvet-lined interior. The carriage lurched forward, the horses' hooves clattering against the cobblestones. Benedict collapsed against the seat, his heart hammering. He looked at his wife. She was staring out the window, watching the grey buildings of London blur past. Her profile was sharp, her expression serene and utterly detached. "You..." Benedict started, then stopped. He didn't know what to say. "You saved my life." Elaine didn't turn. "I saved the family name Benedict. There is a difference." The coldness in her voice struck him harder than the prison cell floor. "Elaine, I had no idea. The ledger, the telegraph logs. How did you organize all of that? You barely speak at dinner." She turned to him then. Her eyes, usually cast down in submission, were now leveled at him with a terrifying calmness. "I speak, Benedict. You simply never listen. You mistook my silence for stupidity. You mistook my compliance for weakness. It was a convenient assumption for you, so I let you keep it." Benedict flushed. "I never said you were stupid." "You didn't have to," she replied. "You treated me like a piece of furniture, a necessary prop for your dynasty. Stick to your embroidery, you said." She let out a soft, dry laugh. "It is fortunate for you that I find embroidery tedious and forensic accounting fascinating." Benedict looked down at his hands. They were trembling. "I have been a fool," he admitted quietly. "A blind, arrogant fool. I underestimated you." "Yes," Elaine said simply. "You did." "I want to make it right," Benedict said, leaning forward. "Elaine, I owe you everything. When we get home, things will change. I promise you." Elaine looked at him, her gaze assessing devoid of the adoration he used to see there, or thought he saw. "Do not make promises you cannot keep, Benedict. You are grateful now because the noose is off your neck. But gratitude fades. Men like you revert to their nature. You like to be the sun with everyone orbiting around you. I have no interest in being a moon. I am not that man anymore," Benedict insisted, feeling a desperation rising in his chest. He realized with a jolt that he didn't just want her forgiveness. He wanted her respect. He had seen her command that courtroom, and for the first time in 3 years, he didn't see a duty. He saw a woman of immense power, and he was terrified he had already lost her. "We shall see," Elaine said, turning back to the window. The rest of the ride was conducted in silence. When they arrived at the Cavendish townhouse in Mayfair, the staff was lined up to welcome the Duke home. The butler, Mr. Henderson, looked tearful. "Welcome home, Your Grace," Henderson cried. "We knew it was a mistake, we knew." Benedict nodded distractedly, handing his coat to a footman. He looked for Elaine, but she was already ascending the grand staircase. "Prepare the blue suite for the Duchess," Benedict ordered the housekeeper. "She will need rest." Elaine paused on the landing. She looked down at him. "The blue suite is next to your chambers, Benedict." "I know," he said, offering a tentative smile. "I thought, perhaps we should be closer. We have much to discuss." "I prefer the East Wing," Elaine said coolly. "It is quiet there, and the lock on the door is new. Good night, Benedict." She walked away, leaving him standing in the foyer, surrounded by his servants, feeling more alone than he had in Newgate Prison. The East Wing was on the opposite side of the house. It was a declaration of independence. She wasn't just sleeping in a different room. She was living in a different world. Over the next week, Benedict tried to court his own wife. It was a pathetic and humbling display. He sent bouquets of white roses, her favorite, he discovered, after asking the gardener, realizing he hadn't known himself. She accepted them with a polite note of thanks. He invited her to private dinners. She declined, citing a headache or correspondence. He began to notice the flow of the house for the first time. He noticed that messengers arrived at odd hours, not for him, but for her. Rough-looking boys from the docks delivering sealed envelopes. Stern-faced men in bowler hats who waited in the vestibule until Elaine came down to whisper with them. One evening, unable to bear the distance, Benedict stormed towards the East Wing. He needed to understand. He needed to break through the wall she had built. He reached her study door. It was a room he had never entered. He turned the handle, locked. He knocked. Elaine, open this door. I am busy, Benedict, came her muffled voice. I am your husband, and I am working. Working on what? He shouted. Embroidery. There was a silence, then the sound of a heavy bolt sliding back. The door opened. Elaine stood there. The room behind her was not a lady's boudoir. It was a chaotic center of operations. Maps were pinned to the walls, maps of the London railways, the shipping lanes of Liverpool, the coal districts of Wales. Stacks of ledgers were put on the floor. But it was the man sitting in the armchair by the fire that made Benedict's blood freeze. He was a massive man, scarred and rugged, wearing the rough clothes of a dock worker, yet holding a crystal glass of Benedict's finest scotch. Who the devil is this? Benedict demanded, stepping into the room. This is Mr. O'Malley, Elaine said calmly, closing the door behind him. He is the foreman of the East London dockyards, and he is currently telling me about the shipment of rifles that was just found in a crate marked textiles bound for Belfast. Benedict stared at O'Malley, then at his wife. Rifles Belfast, Elaine, what is going on? You exposed Reginald. It's over. Elaine walked to her desk and picked up a cigarette. Something Benedict had never seen her do, and lit it. She exhaled a plume of smoke, looking at him through the haze. Reginald was a pawn, Benedict, she said softly. He was a greedy little man who stole money. But the treason charges the connection to the anarchists that wasn't Reginald. He didn't have the imagination for it. Someone planted those documents to destroy you, and they used Reginald's theft as the cover. Benedict felt the room spin. Someone else? Who? That is what Mr. O'Malley and I are trying to find out, Elaine said. You were targeted, Benedict. Not because of your money, but because of your vote on the railway bill. If you had gone to prison, your cousin Arthur would have inherited the title. And how would Arthur have voted? Benedict went cold. Arthur is a gambling addict. He's in debt to half the moneylenders in London. He would have voted however his creditors told him to. Exactly, Elaine said. Someone wanted the railway bill to fail, or they wanted to control the route. They tried to remove you from the board. I stopped them. But they are still out there. Then we must go to the police, Benedict said. The police, O'Malley chuckled, a sound like gravel in a grinder. Begging your pardon, your grace, but half the yard is on the payroll of the man we're hunting. You go to the police and you'll end up with a knife in your ribs before morning. Benedict looked at his wife, this stranger in blue velvet, who smoked cigarettes and commanded dock workers. You are playing a dangerous game, Elaine. I have been playing it for a long time, she said. My father served in the Foreign Office, Benedict. He wasn't just a clerk. He was an analyst. He taught me to see patterns where others see chaos. When I married you, I thought I could leave that life behind. I thought I could just be a duchess. But you made it very clear that being a duchess meant being nothing. So I found hobbies. Benedict felt a mixture of awe and shame. I ignored you so you saved the empire. Something like that, she said wryly. Now are you going to stand there and gape, or are you going to help us? Mr. O'Malley needs a signature to access the customs manifest at the port. A duke's signature. Benedict looked at the rough dock worker, then at his formidable wife. He walked to the desk, took the pen from her hand, and signed the paper without reading it. Tell me what to do, Benedict said. Elaine smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had given him in years. Pull up a chair, husband. The lesson is just beginning. The alliance between Benedict and Elaine was tentative, forged in the fires of necessity rather than passion. For weeks, the Duke and Duchess of Wycliffe lived a double life. By day, they were the golden couple of London society, attending operas and garden parties, smiling for the sketch artists. Benedict played the part of the humbled, grateful husband, while Elaine played the part of the devoted, if slightly mysterious wife. But by night, Wycliffe Manor transformed into a war room. Benedict learned that his wife had built a network of informants that rivaled the Crown's own intelligence service. She had housemaids in the homes of Parliament members, street urchins who watched the carriage comings and goings, and clerks in the Bank of England. They were the invisible army, as she called them. People no one noticed. People like the woman she used to be. Information is currency, Elaine explained one night as they pored over a map of the proposed railway lines. And right now, someone is spending a fortune to keep the route away from the Manchester coalfields. Why? Benedict asked, tracing the line. The Manchester route is the most logical. It's the most profitable. For the country, yes, Elaine said, but not for the owner of the land on the alternative route, the route through the Derwent Valley. Benedict frowned. The Derwent Valley? That's mostly swampland and jagged rock. It would cost millions to build there. Who owns it? Elaine slid a piece of paper across the desk. A holding company called Titan Enterprises, registered in the Cayman Islands, but the dividends are paid out to a bank in Geneva, and from there they are wired to a private account in London. Whose account? We don't know yet, Elaine admitted, frustration creasing her brow. The bank has a firewall of silence, but we have a lead. There is a gala tomorrow night at the French embassy. The head of the Geneva Bank, Monsieur Dubois, will be there. And you intend to ask him? Benedict asked skeptically. I intend to steal his pocketbook, Elaine said calmly. Or rather, I intend for you to distract him while I acquire it. Benedict stared at her. You want the Duke of Wycliffe to aid in a pickpocketing? I want the Duke of Wycliffe to discuss vintage wines with a boor, Elaine corrected. Dubois loves Bordeaux. You have a cellar full of it. Charm him. Make him feel important. While he is boasting, I will brush past him. It will take 2 seconds. The gala was a glittering affair of crystal chandeliers and silk gowns. Benedict felt a nervous sweat on his palms, but Elaine was cool as ice. She wore a gown of emerald green that hugged her figure, a diamond choker at her throat. She looked dangerous. There he is, she whispered, nodding toward a portly man near the buffet. Go. Benedict straightened his sash and approached. Monsieur Dubois, I hear you are a man of discerning taste. The banker preened. Your Grace, you flatter me. As Benedict launched into a monologue about the 1845 vintage, he watched Elaine out of the corner of his eye. She moved through the crowd like Sogquirk. She paused near a waiter, adjusted her glove, and then turned, bumping lightly into Dubois. Oh, 1,000 pardons, monsieur, she said, her voice dripping with charm. The fault is mine. Duchess. Dubois bowed. Elaine smiled and moved on. Benedict finished his conversation and retreated to the terrace, his heart racing. A moment later, Elaine appeared beside him. In her hand, hidden within the folds of her fan, was a small black notebook. Got it, she whispered. They retreated to the carriage, not waiting for the speeches. Inside, by the light of a small lantern, Elaine flipped through the notebook. Here, she said, her finger tracing a line of numbers. Account 774. The recipient of the Titan Enterprises dividends. The name is... Coded. Coded, Benedict leaned in. Let me see. He looked at the series of numbers. 4, 21, 111, 5. It's a substitution cipher, Benedict said slowly. Simple. Child's play. My uncle used to use this to hide his mistresses' names in his diary. A is 1, B is 2. He did the mental math. 4 equals D. 21 equals U. 11 equals K. 5 equaled E. Duke. Elaine read. Duke of what? Benedict looked at the next line. 15, 6, 3, 1. 18, 18, 15, 23, 1, 25. O, F, C, A, R, R, O, W, A, Y. Of Caraway. Benedict whispered, the blood draining from his face. Lord Caraway, Elaine gasped. The Earl. The man who sponsored your membership into the House of Lords. Your godfather. It can't be, Benedict said, shaking his head. He's like a father to me. He sat at my table. He held me when I was a boy. He owns the Derwent Valley, Elaine said, her mind racing. If the railway goes through his land, the government pays him millions in expropriation fees. He becomes the richest man in England. But your plan, the Manchester route, ruined that. You stood in the way of his fortune. So he framed me for treason. Benedict said, his voice trembling with rage. He used Reginald to destroy me, so Arthur would take over and approve the Derwent route. He was going to send me to the gallows for money. We have to expose him, Elaine said. We have the notebook. We have the link. No, Benedict said, grabbing her hand. Caraway is not Reginald. He is powerful. He controls the judges. He controls the press. If we come at him with a stolen notebook, he will crush us. He will kill us. Then what do? We play his game, Benedict said, his eyes hardening. He thinks I am a broken man, lucky to have escaped jail. He thinks you are just a clever wife who saved her husband once. He doesn't know we know. Benedict, Elaine said warningly. Caraway is dangerous. He has killed before. Reginald was terrified of someone. It was him. I know, Benedict said, but he made one mistake. What? He taught me how to hunt, Benedict said darkly. Tomorrow is the royal hunt at Windsor. Caraway will be there, and so will I. But they had underestimated the Earl. When they returned to Wycliffe Manor that night, the house was dark. Too dark. The servants were nowhere to be seen. Stay behind me, Benedict whispered. Reaching for the walking stick, he carried a heavy piece of oak with a lead-weighted head. They entered the foyer. A single candle flickered on the center table. Beside it sat a man in a high-backed chair. It was Lord Caraway. He was sipping tea, his shotgun resting casually across his knees. Hello, Benedict, the old man said, his voice warm and grandfatherly. Hello, Elaine. You two left the party early. I missed our chat. Get out of my house, Benedict growled, stepping in front of Elaine. Now, Caraway tutted. Is that any way to speak to your godfather, especially when I've come to offer you a deal? We know about the Derwent Valley, Elaine said from behind Benedict. Her voice was steady, but her hand gripped Benedict's coat tightly. Caraway sighed. I feared you might. You are a troublesome woman, Elaine. I told Benedict not to marry you. I said she's too quiet. Quiet women think too much. But he wouldn't listen. He stood up, the shotgun shifting in his grip. Here is the deal, Caraway said. Benedict, you will resign your seat in the Lords tomorrow. You will cite health reasons. You will retire to the country. Elaine. Well, Elaine will have a tragic accident on the stairs tonight. A broken neck. Very sad. Over my dead body, Benedict snarled. That, Carraway smiled, was the other option. From the shadows of the hallway, 4 men emerged. They were not gentlemen. They were hired thugs wielding clubs and knives. "Kill them," Carraway said, finishing his tea. "Make it look like a burglary gone wrong." Benedict didn't think. He reacted. He swung his weighted cane, cracking the jaw of the first attacker. "Run, Elaine. Run to the study. The gun." Elaine didn't run. She grabbed a heavy vase from the console table and smashed it over the head of the second man, who lunged for Benedict. "I'm not leaving you," she screamed. For a moment, they fought back to back, the Duke and the Duchess, surrounded by enemies in their own home. Benedict fought with the savage fury of a man protecting his world. Elaine fought with the calculated desperation of a woman who refused to die. But they were outnumbered. A heavy club struck Benedict's shoulder, sending him to his knees. A knife slashed across Elaine's arm, and she cried out, falling back against the stairs. "Enough!" Carraway barked. The thugs stepped back. Benedict gasped for air, clutching his shattered shoulder. Elaine held her bleeding arm, her face pale. Carraway walked over to Elaine. He looked down at her with pity. "A waste. You really are quite brilliant. But you picked the wrong side." He raised the shotgun, aiming it at her heart. "No," Benedict roared, trying to rise, but a thug kicked him back down. "Say goodbye, Duchess," Carraway said. Bang! The gunshot deafened them. But Carraway didn't fire. The Earl's eyes went wide. He looked down at his chest. A red blossom of blood was spreading across his white shirt. He swayed the shotgun, clattering to the floor, and collapsed. Standing in the doorway of the drawing room, smoke curling from the barrel of a long-barreled pistol, was not a servant. It was not the police. It was Mr. O'Malley. And behind him, a dozen rough-looking men from the docks, armed with wrenches, crowbars, and pistols. "Sorry we're late, Your Grace," O'Malley grunted, stepping over the body of a thug. Traffic on the bridge was murder. Elaine slumped against the banister, the adrenaline fading. Benedict crawled to her, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. He ripped off his cravat and wrapped it around her bleeding arm. "Elaine," he choked out. "Elaine, look at me." She opened her eyes, hazy with pain. "Did we win?" Benedict looked at the dead Earl, then at the army of dock workers, filling his hall, his wife's army. "Yes," Benedict whispered, pulling her into his arms and kissing her forehead, tears streaming down his face. "You won. You won everything." The silence that followed the gunshot was heavy, broken only by the ragged breathing of the Duke and the distant fading wail of a police whistle. Benedict held Elaine tight, his hand pressing the silk cravat against her arm, which was rapidly soaking through with crimson. "O'Malley," Elaine whispered, her voice faint but steady. "The ledger. Carraway's pocket. Get it." Even bleeding on the floor, she was commanding the room. The giant Irishman nodded grimly. He stepped over the Earl's body, retrieved the small black notebook from the dead man's coat, and tucked it into his rough vest. "Consider it done, Duchess. The boys will clear out the trash." He gestured to the unconscious thugs. "Before the coppers get past the gate. But you need a doctor." "Henderson!" Benedict roared, his voice cracking with panic. "Get the physician now!" The next few hours were a blur of controlled chaos. The family physician, Dr. Morehouse, arrived within minutes, his face pale as he surveyed the carnage in the foyer. Benedict refused to leave the room, while Elaine was stitched up. He sat in a chair beside the chaise lounge where they had laid her, holding her uninjured hand as if it were an anchor, keeping him from drifting into madness. Inspector Graham arrived an hour later. He looked at the dead Earl, the shattered vase, and the blood on the floor. Then he looked at Benedict, who was still covered in dust and blood, sitting protectively over his wife. "A burglary, you say?" "Your Grace," Graham asked, his tone skeptical as he nudged Carraway's shotgun with his boot. "And the Earl of Carraway just happened to be here to assist you." Benedict stood up. The pain in his shoulder was a dull throb, but he felt a cold, hard clarity he had never possessed before. He walked over to the inspector. "Lord Carraway was not assisting me, Inspector." Benedict said, his voice low and dangerous. "Lord Carraway was the burglar, or rather the mastermind. That is a serious accusation," Graham warned. "He is a peer of the realm." "He was a traitor," Benedict corrected, "and he came here to assassinate me and my wife because we uncovered his theft of the railway funds. My wife has the documents. My wife has the proof. And if you value your career, Inspector, you will ensure that the report reads self-defense. Because if you try to bury this, I will take the evidence to the Queen herself, and I will mention that Scotland Yard ignored 3 requests for protection." It was a bluff. He hadn't requested protection, but Benedict delivered it with such imperious conviction that Graham took a step back. "I see," Graham said, taking off his hat. "Self-defense. A tragedy, really. A man of his standing losing his mind like that." "A tragedy," Benedict agreed coldly. "Now remove the body. My wife needs rest." When the house was finally quiet, Benedict carried Elaine upstairs himself, ignoring the protests of the maids. He laid her gently in the center of the massive bed in the blue suite, his room. "You should sleep in the east wing," Elaine murmured, her eyes half closed from the laudanum the doctor had administered. "Your shoulder? To hell with my shoulder," Benedict said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "And to hell with the east wing. I am sleeping right here, on the floor, if I must." He pulled a chair to the bedside. For 3 nights he did not leave. He fed her broth. He changed her bandages. He read to her from the very newspapers that were now hailing her as a heroine. The Duchess of Iron, the headlines read, "Savior of the Railway." On the 4th morning, Elaine woke to find Benedict asleep in the chair, his head resting on the mattress near her hand. She watched him for a long time. He looked younger in his sleep, the lines of stress smoothed out. She shifted, and he woke instantly. "You're in pain?" he asked, reaching for the water. "No," she said. "I am just thinking." "About what?" "About why you are still here," she said. "The danger is past. Carraway is dead. Reginald is in prison. You have your title, your reputation, and your money. You don't need to play the nursemaid to secure my silence." Benedict froze. He set the water glass down slowly. He looked at her, seeing the walls she was trying to rebuild. She expected him to revert. She expected the arrogant Duke to return the moment the crisis ended. "Is that what you think this is?" Benedict asked, his voice trembling. "A transaction. Our marriage was a transaction, Benedict," she reminded him gently. "Land for a title, duty for security. We fulfilled the contract." Benedict stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the sprawling estate, the land that had been in his family for generations. It meant nothing to him compared to the woman in the bed. "I don't want the contract," he said, turning back to her. "I want to tear it up." Elaine's eyes widened slightly. You want a divorce? No. Benedict crossed the room in 2 strides, kneeling beside the bed. He took her hand, bowing his head over it. I want a marriage, Elaine. A real one. I spent 3 years looking through you, and when I finally saw you, you were the most magnificent thing I had ever beheld. I am not nursing you because of duty. I am doing it because I am terrified that you will realize you are too good for me and leave. Elaine looked at him, looked at Walt. She saw the raw honesty in his eyes. She saw the fear. For the first time, the power balance didn't feel like a weapon. It felt like a bridge. I am not easy, Benedict, she warned. I have secrets. I have a network of spies. I smoke cigarettes when I am stressed, and I do not like embroidery. Benedict laughed, a sound of pure relief. I hate embroidery. And as for the spies, perhaps we can find a use for them. The estate could use better management. Elaine smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. She squeezed his hand. Very well, husband, but you have a lot of making up to do. I have a lifetime, Benedict promised. 6 months later, the London season began with the ball of the century at Wycliffe Manor. The estate had been transformed. The gloom was gone, replaced by golden light and fresh flowers. The guest list was the most exclusive in England. Everyone wanted to see the Duke and his Iron Duchess. Benedict stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking dashing in formal evening wear. But he was merely the herald. Her Grace the Duchess of Wycliffe, the announcer bellowed. Elaine appeared at the top of the stairs. She wore a gown of shimmering silver commissioned from Paris. Around her neck was not the modest pearls of her past, but the Wycliffe diamonds, a heavy, intricate necklace that hadn't been worn in 50 years because no duchess had been deemed strong enough to carry the weight. Elaine wore them as if they were feathers. She descended the stairs, and the room fell silent. Benedict walked up to meet her halfway. He didn't offer her his arm in the traditional manner of a lord leading his lady. Instead, he held out his hand, palm up, a gesture of invitation of partnership. She placed her hand in his. You look nervous, Benedict, she teased in a whisper. I am, he admitted. I'm dancing with the most dangerous woman in Europe. Just don't step on my toes. She smiled. They swept onto the dance floor. As they waltzed, Benedict noticed the whispers. Most were admiring, but some were still venomous. The old guard, the men who liked their women silent and decorative, were glaring. Lord Pembroke, a notoriously misogynistic peer, leaned in as they passed. Enjoying the show, Wycliffe, he sneered loud enough for those nearby to hear. It's charming how you let your wife play at politics, but we all know who really wears the trousers, don't we? Best get her back to the nursery before she hurts herself. The music seemed to stop for those in the immediate vicinity. Elaine stiffened, ready to retort with a cutting remark that would destroy Pembroke's ego. But she didn't have to. Benedict stopped dancing. He released Elaine's waist and turned slowly to face Lord Pembroke. The entire ballroom went deathly quiet. My lord, Benedict said, his voice carrying clearly to the musicians' gallery. You seem to be under a misapprehension. Oh, Pembroke smirked. And what is that? You believe that I let my wife do anything, Benedict said calmly. The truth is, Lord Pembroke, I do not permit the Duchess to act. I simply try to keep up with her. He stepped closer, towering over the other man. This woman saved my life. She saved my estate. She exposed a corruption that rotted the very heart of this court. She possesses more courage in her little finger than you possess in your entire lineage. If she is playing at politics, then she is winning. And you, You are merely a spectator." Pembrose turned a brilliant shade of purple. Benedict turned back to Elaine. He didn't just take her hand. In front of 300 of England's highest nobles, the Duke of Wycliffe dropped to one knee. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A duke never knelt, not to anyone but the Queen. Benedict looked up at his wife, his eyes shining with adoration and absolute pride. "May I have the honor of the next dance, Your Grace?" Elaine looked down at him. She saw the man who had once ignored her, now offering her his total submission, not out of weakness, but out of strength. He was showing the world that he was not afraid to honor her power. She smiled a smile that would be captured in portraits for a century. "Stand up, Benedict," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We face the world together, standing tall." Benedict rose. He kissed her hand and then swept her back into the waltz. The crowd erupted into applause, genuine, thunderous applause. As they spun, Benedict leaned into her ear. "Did that suffice? It was dramatic." Elaine laughed. "Mr. O'Malley would have loved it." "Speaking of O'Malley," Benedict said, glancing towards the balcony, where the shadowy figure of the Irishman was quietly enjoying a cigar. "He tells me there is a shipping dispute in Liverpool that looks suspicious. Something about smuggled gold." Elaine's eyes lit up with that familiar, sharp intelligence. "Liverpool. I have a contact in the harbourmaster's office." "I know," Benedict grinned. "I already packed our bags. We leave at dawn." Elaine pulled him closer. "I love you, Benedict." "And I you, Elaine," he replied. "Now let's finish this dance. We have a villain to catch." The terrified mouse was gone forever. The Lioness of Wycliffe had risen, and with the Duke by her side, there was nothing in the empire they could not conquer. What a journey. From a disregarded wife in a grey dress to the mastermind who brought down a corrupt empire, Elaine Cavendish proved that silence is not weakness. It's just a pause before the strike. Benedict learned the hard way that the most powerful ally you can have is the one you've been overlooking. It's a powerful reminder to never underestimate the people around us. Sometimes the quietest hearts hold the loudest storms. I hope you enjoyed this dramatic historical saga of betrayal, redemption, and power. If you did, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about underestimated heroes and karmic justice, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a part. Question for you. Have you ever been underestimated by someone close to you, only to prove them wrong later? Let me know your story in the comments below. Thanks for watching.